All right, hey, thank you for checking out this video or maybe returning to this channel. Mike here, but I'm just talking about a way to just find a lot of the basic chords on the guitar fretboard. Especially for beginner guitarists. I think a lot of guitarists go for a while, like you're self-taught or maybe you've just learned a few lessons from various places, but don't get a simple perspective on a lot of things. So we're talking about finding a couple versions of every major and minor chord on the fretboard, right? The first thing to really learn is that there's 12 major musical notes in Western musical structure, right? So you may already be aware of them, and there's different ways you could say some of those notes, but overall we're talking about the alphabet, and specifically the letters A through G, right? The letters A through G, which just simply repeat themselves. And those are what we call natural notes, just A, B, C, D, E, F, G. But there's also what we call augmented notes or sharps and flats in that sequence. And the only thing that really makes them unique is their name. Of course, the frequency of the pitch, but also their name in terms of these notes, right? So talking about these 12 Western musical notes, right? The way we would start those notes were with the A, maybe like we want to find an A note on the guitar. The A note here, the first A note is on this E string on the 5th fret, right? That's an A note, right? This is an E string. If you're tuned to your standard tuning of it, E, A, D, G, B, E, right? This is an A note right here, which would tune to this A string right here. So with this A note right here, we take this 12 note pattern, right? So we start with A. The next note is B flat, right? So we're just going one fret at a time, right? Next note is B flat. Next note is B. Next note is C. Next note is C sharp. Next note is D. Next note is E flat. Next note is E. Next note is F. F sharp. G. A flat. G sharp or A flat. So if I say G sharp, that would also be the same thing as an A flat, right? If I say an F sharp, that's the same thing as a G flat, right? So hopefully we know some of this stuff, but we're just taking these 12 notes mainly, right? So like I said, we just went through them once. We can start from any note within that sequence, and it's going to be those 12 notes. So like I said, once again, A, B flat, B, C, C sharp, D, E flat, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, and A. Once again, this is the 17th fret, which is the same as the 5th fret, just what we call a register or an octave higher. Now, finding these chords here for each one of these notes, that's the main thing, right? There's different versions of chords we can play in a key. Two of the main ones are what we call the major chord, the tonic major chord, or dominant tonic major chord, which is the first note of that major key. Whatever that key is. How is the key determined? Well, we take a certain pattern of notes out of those 12 notes. Right? A certain pattern of notes out of those 12 notes. And then probably the most common pattern in Western musical structure, and probably the vast majority of music you hear, like 95+% of it, is going to fall within this structure of what we call a spacing of steps, right? What we call either a half step, which is 1 fret, or a whole step, which is 2 frets. So if we're going to do a half step, we're just moving 1 fret up or down if we're doing a half step down. But generally speaking, we're talking about going through this pattern for a key. We're talking about going up, right? Now, the spacing, this pattern, is what we call 2 whole steps and a half step, and then 3 whole steps and a half step. So a half step is, like you said, 1 fret away. A whole step is 2 frets away. So let's say we're starting from this A note, once again. That would be a whole step, right, to make 2 whole steps, and then a half step, right, to make that first half step, right? And then we're going to do 3 whole steps and a half step, right? And that should bring us back to our original note, but just an octave higher or a register higher. So we're going to 1 whole step, 2 whole steps, half step, and then another whole step, and another whole step, and then a third whole step, and then a half step on the 17th fret, which once again is the A note, right? So these notes have their own names that fit within that 12 note pattern, right? So some of them in this case will be sharps and flats. Now there is one key that doesn't have any sharps and flats according to that 12-note pattern, that 12-note sequence. It's the key of C, right? The key of C, C major, right, specifically. So when we say the key of C, we do mean C major. But taking this C note, which is right here on the 8th fret of our E string, right, if we were to go a whole step, and a half step, and this would be creating the key of C major by doing that. Like here we were doing the key of A major by doing the 2 whole steps, half step, 3 whole steps, half step. Here at the C note, we could do a C major key, or all the notes in the key of C major by doing the same pattern. 2 whole steps, a half step, 3 whole steps, and a half step, right? So obviously just like we were 2 frets down here, or 3 frets down here on the A note, when we play the C note, we're going to end up, 3 frets higher than we landed when we started with the A note, right? So we're going to be like up here. So it's just going to go from the C note here on this 8th fret, whole step, half step, whole step, half step, and we're back on a C note again. So we're kind of understanding how to, essentially derive any major key by doing that, starting from any note in that 12-note sequence. So once again, like if we're starting from an E, this 12-note sequence would be E, F, right? Because now we want to remember this, kind of just remember simple, just keep it simple, generally speaking. The standard way to say it is that there's 2 flats and 3 sharps, right? E and B have a flat, and C, G, and F, C, F, and G have a sharp, right? So they have a note that's right above them, 1/2 a step, or 1 fret, that is a sharp note. Right, so if there's an F, the next note up, I'm not in there, but the next note up from F is F sharp. So this is F, right? E, F, F sharp. G, we know G has a sharp. Remembering there's 3 C, F, and G have a sharp, so there's a G sharp. If there's a G sharp, the next note has to be A. There's not going to be a flat, like G sharp would be A flat. Right, A flattened 1 fret would be A flat or G sharp, same note. Right, but the most standard way I know it to be is this would generally be called a G sharp. Right, but if you say an A flat, you mean the same note. Right, so A, B flat, B, C, C sharp, D, E flat, and E again. Right, so it just repeats itself going up the strings in that same exact sequence, starting from any note in that sequence. So once again, we've got the 12 notes. We understand how to take any of those notes and start out from that note and do 2 whole steps and a half step, 3 whole steps and a half step. Now, say we were starting back on that A note and doing that 2 whole steps and a half step. You notice that like we start from the C note. Right? If we start from the C note, like I said, it's no sharps or flats. So if we play it from the C note and doing the 2 whole steps, half step, and 3 whole steps and a half step, there's no sharps or flats. Just C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, no sharps or flats. But if we were in the key of A, on the other hand, those 2 whole steps and a half step, 3 whole steps and a half step are going to fall on a different pattern in those 12 main notes. So we're going to play from the A note 2 whole steps and a half step and 3 whole steps and a half step. So we're playing from the A note to the B note, right? That's a whole step, to the C sharp note. Right, that's another whole step, 2 whole steps, right? So you notice we skipped the C note on the 8th fret. We went to C sharp, because like you said, C, F, and G have a sharp, right? So going from A, B, C sharp. The next note is just a half step, because we went 2 whole steps and a half. So now we're doing the D note, right? Just a D. Okay, the next note is an E note. The next note is an F sharp note, right? We're playing our first 2 of our last 3 whole steps, right? So we had 2 whole steps, half step, 1, 2, 3, and then another half step, right? 1, 2, 3 whole steps, and then another half step to A again, right? So you notice that those notes, like once again, A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A, right? So, and knowing that right here, we can play that same stuff down here. This is F sharp right here, G sharp, A, right? So these are all falling in the key of A major. And and I'm just playing some of the notes there, but if I play the, you know, 2 whole steps, half step, 3 whole steps, half step, right? So, and I can play from C major, 2 whole steps, half step, 3 whole steps, half step. I can play from B flat major, right? Two whole steps, half step, 3 whole steps, and a half step, right? And what are the notes there? Like we take the B flat, we go a whole step from B flat. We're gonna, obviously if there's a B flat, there has to be a B, right? So if there's a B flat, then there's B, but the second note going to the 2 whole steps from B flat would be the C note, right? So B flat, C, right? The second whole step would be to D. Then the first half step would be to E flat, right, on the 11th fret here. The first of the 3 whole steps, they go from E flat to F, passing an E, right? E flat, E, F, right? Then the next whole step is going to go to G. Next whole step is good to A. And then the last half step is going to go back to B flat, of course, right? That's what we call our octave of 8 notes when it repeats with that first note again. You know, so like you say, you know, like in the key of A here, right? Or B flat, you know, either one, any one of them, right? There's 7 notes, and when we repeat the first note, that creates the completion of an octave, right? So A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A, right? So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or A, right? So it's just repeating that octave over and over. Now, we can take those concepts and apply them to these chords as well. So there's a few major chords. Maybe you already know a lot of chords. Maybe you kind of just understand, you know, like the basic chords, probably a lot of open chords people learn right here. Like here, like example, E major, right? Right, E major. You can see the fingers I'm using there. You're probably already familiar with it if you've been playing guitar for 10 minutes. Right, E major, E minor. Right, what we're doing here is just flattening the 3rd note out of the key of E major and flattening it 1 fret or a half step, and that's making it E minor, right? So if we take the key of E, starting from this open E string, for example, and play the 2 whole steps, half step, 3 whole steps, half step, we'd be going from this E note, this whole step here to F sharp, right? We have to skip 1 note here, so E to, you know, past F to F sharp, right? That would be a whole step. Another whole step to G sharp, a half step to A, right? And then our 3 whole steps are coming up from A, B, C sharp, E flat, E, right? We just went through the octave starting from the E note in that 12-note sequence using the 2 whole steps, half step, 3 whole steps, half step, right? E, F sharp, G sharp, A, right? B, C sharp, E flat, E. We just played an octave in the key of E major. So, like when we played the chord E major, we're playing notes from that key. Nothing but notes of those 7 notes, right? And we're specifically playing the 1st, 3rd, and 5th note in that sequence in the key of E major. The 1st, 3rd, and 5th note, well, the 1st note is obviously E. This is the 2nd note in that sequence of 7 notes, right? The 3rd note is over here on G sharp. So this note, these 2 notes would make up part of an E major chord. What's the 5th note? Well, we go up here with that first half step, and then our first of our 3 whole steps would take us to this B note, right? So we've derived the 3 notes that make up any major chord. E major is made up of an E, a G sharp, and a B. E, G sharp, and B. Any combination of E, G sharp, and B will essentially be some kind of E major chord, specifically when the E is the lowest note of the chord, right? That really determines that it's classified as an E chord, right? The lowest note is an E note, right? So E major, right? So these are all just E's, G sharps, and B's. This is an E note. this is a B, right? This is a G sharp. I'm sorry. This is an E note again. E note, right? So E, B, E, then G sharp, which makes sense. Just first fret of the G string, right? G sharp. So E, E, B, E, G sharp, and then down here B and E again, right? So you see it's just E's, B's, and G sharps that make up that E major chord. And another chord you might be familiar with is this A major chord, right? So now what we do, and real quickly, what we did there is we flattened the third to make this E a minor, right? So we were taking this third note here, which from E going to the third note would be this note. We're flattening it 1/2 step to make it what we call minor, which really corresponds with another major key. But we'll talk about that in a minute. But just talking about, this E, E major, right, can be made into a minor by flattening the third. Now let's play it with these 3 fingers maybe a little bit. Get used to doing that as well, right? Taking that off, making it major or minor, right? There's another type of chord here called, in this case here in the open position down here on playing open chords would be A major, right? You're probably already familiar with that. Many people watching this, but we make it minor by doing the same thing, flattening the third note in the key of A major, right? It corresponds with that type of chord. It's an A chord. So we're talking about the key of A major. What would be the third note, the key of A major? Well, from A, right, 2 whole steps would be to this note right here, which is a C sharp note, right? So that C sharp is what's determining that it's an A major chord if it's including a C sharp. If we flattened it to just C, that would turn it to an A minor chord, right? So this A, or maybe with these 3 fingers, play it like that, and then you can take this one off here and just put that right there to make it minor, because that's the third note right here in the key of A major. We're just flattening it down to make it minor, right? And what was that note? It was a C sharp, right? So this should be a C sharp right here, right? Which makes sense because this is a B string. C, C sharp, B, C, C sharp, according to that 12-note structure, right? So we've got 2 chords here, an E major and an E minor, right? We got 2 types of chord. We're playing 2 types of 2 different chords, right? We're playing an E chord, but we're playing an E major, or maybe with these 3 fingers, and an E minor, an A major, and an A minor, right? But we can also just follow that sequence of 12 notes to play all these chords up the fretboard for each of these chord structures. So we can just take this E major, just move it all up a fret, and add a bar right here, right? So now we're playing F major, right? So E major, F major, just like we follow these notes, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A, B flat, B, C, C sharp. So we're just doing E major, F major, F sharp major, G major, G sharp major, A major, to the 5th fret, right? B flat major, B major, C major, C sharp major, D major, E flat major, and back on the 12th fret, E note, E major again, right? It's hard to play it right there, but playing E major chord there, just moving it all up and one fret at a time. Now we know how to play one version of every major chord right there, just with that, right? So if someone says to play B major, you could just go right here to B note and just play that same as the structure of an E major down here, right? So just pretty standard. A lot of guitarists are already familiar with all this stuff, of course, but maybe there's something you can open up here a little bit, or maybe you have a student or someone that wants to just learn this basic structure, you want to share it with them. But talking about, being able to find these chords quickly, or know these chords, basically identify, just a lot of people will learn a bunch of chords, not really understand how they fit in with the big picture. But like I said, with the E major, now we can also do that with the E minor, right? Taking that note off. That's why we're playing with these second 3 fingers. We can be ready to bar, right? We're going E minor, F minor, just, keeping this finger off, right? And flattening that third note, making it minor. So it's then F sharp minor, right? Second fret is our bass note, F sharp minor, right? the G minor, G sharp minor, A minor, right? Same as this over here, right? We're playing it over here with this, using this string as our bass note. Where down here we were using this second string as our bass note, which is an A note, of course, right? Up here we're using this string as our bass note for this A minor, right? So once again, E minor, F minor, F sharp minor, G sharp minor, A minor, B flat minor, B minor, C sharp minor, D minor, E flat minor, E minor, right? And then same thing with this chord down here. You got A major, B flat major, right? B major, C sharp major, D major, right here in the 5th fret, D major. In this position, we're using the second string essentially as our bass note. So this is our D note, D major, okay, so E major. I'm sorry, E flat major right here, right? So don't forget that one. E major, F major, F sharp major, G major, G sharp major. Kind of hard to play it up here, but you can play variations or some of the notes or whatever. And back up to A major, right here, right on the 12th fret, essentially playing the same thing as we were doing down here, right? So this gives you a little bit of an idea. So what we can also do is the same thing with any other chord, right? So, we play like an E7 right here, just these two notes, right? It's an E minor 7, I should say. Or I should say keeping these two notes. Normally in E minor, right, we might play like we were just doing, E minor, adding in this note right here, right, which is the 7th note out of the key of E minor, which, understanding that means we'd be playing in the key of E minor. So real quickly, just kind of talking about how those keys relate as well. We have a corresponding minor key for each major key. That corresponding minor key is actually known, it's coming from the 6th note in any major key, right? So if we're in the key of E major, like I said, starting from this E note, playing the 2 whole steps, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. Sorry, I guess. Okay. The 6th note in that pattern, we're going to look at the 6th note. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6th note happens to be C sharp. Right? 6th note determines the corresponding minor key for that major key. The major key is E major. Right? So the corresponding minor key is the 6th note of E major, which is C sharp. So that would be the corresponding minor key for E major. And you can see there's this E note right up here. It's just this many frets below. So if I'm here playing an E chord, E major, I should say, it's just like the open E major down here, trying to play it on these 3 frets, I could go down 3 frets to play a minor version of a chord, taking this finger off, middle finger off, right, and playing a minor chord, and that corresponds to it, and that's the same everywhere. So I'm over here in C major, playing C sharp major, just drop down those 3 frets. In this case, it lands on A, play it minor. So C sharp major and A minor are essentially the same key. They're just starting from a different place in the key of C major, right? In the 6th degree, or the 6th note. In this case, in the key of C major would be A. In the key of E major, right, it would determine it was C sharp, right? In the key of A major, the 6th note would be A, 1, 2, 3, doing 2 whole steps, a half step, 3 whole steps, and a half step, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, F sharp. 6th note in the key of A major is F sharp. So the corresponding minor key to A major would be F sharp minor, right? And we can even do it back down here. We know that A major starts from here, right? So we go down those 3 frets, 1, 2, 3 to F sharp, That's minor. You play that corresponding minor chord, and they'll kind of like, you can play them in the same key, right? They have, like, these two chords don't necessarily have all the same notes, but they both have notes from the same key, the key of A major. Now, if you're using this sixth note of A major, or the F sharp note, which is the first note of this F minor, or the F minor chord, and what is called the Aeolian mode of A major in this case, starting from this F sharp note, we would play an Aeolian mode, which is a certain pattern of notes. That, you know, we play those pattern of notes to stay in the key of A, but playing from the sixth note in the key of A, which is F sharp. We would be using that F sharp as our tonal center, right? So that F sharp would be the bass note in that case. So this Western musical structure, these 2 whole steps, half step, 3 whole steps, half step, is really a cycle. You can start from the second degree and treat that as your tonal center. The third degree as your tonal center. The most common, though, obviously, is the first degree that we have now, right? So playing for 2 whole steps, half step. But if you wanted to play from the second note, like in the key of, let's say from the G note, right? Whole step, half step, whole step, half step to G again. Right, we play from that second note, which would be from the key of G. The second note is A, right? That first whole step. So if we were playing from that A, though, it would go from whole step, half step, to stay in the key of G. Right? If we're staying in the key of G, these 2 whole steps, half step pattern. But we're starting from the second note in the key of A. So this is what we call the second mode, or the Dorian mode. In the key of A, the key of G. A playing A Dorian would be the key of G. The third note in the key of G is a B note. This mode is called Phrygian, right? So there's 7 modes. There's a mode for each note of the key, right? So like we're talking about the key of G right here. But same thing with the key of C right here on this 8th fret once again, right? So each one of these notes that's in the key of C has its own mode. The first one is Ionian. Second one's Dorian, just like down here. The G would be Ionian. Right? Next one would be Dorian. Right? The third one is Phrygian. Right? So the next one is what we call Lydian. Next one is Mixolydian. Right? The next one is Aeolian. And that's the 6th one. Right, which is what we call the corresponding minor. But really, each one of those 7 is its own corresponding mode, if you will. Aeolian, or the corresponding minor, just happens to be one of them. Right, so if I'm playing the key of A major, I'm playing an A major chord right here, just like an E major over here, but on the 5th fret, A major, right? The corresponding minor, once again, F sharp minor. And if I move it all down a fret, the pattern is the same. So A major, I move it down a fret, is G sharp major. Right, so we move that down 3 frets, we can land on F minor. Right, just below the F sharp, right, down here on the 1st fret, F minor. Right, so whatever, you know, like I said, C major corresponds with A minor. D major corresponds with B minor. Right, E major corresponds with C sharp minor, which we just talked about, right? E, C sharp, you know, there's an E flat major corresponds with C minor, right? E flat major, C minor, and, you know, so or C sharp major. C sharp major corresponds with B flat minor, so just 3 frets below it. If we're looking on the guitar like that, or, you know, a step and a half, 3 frets, 3 half steps, same thing, right? So we're just basically looking at some chord structure there, you know, basically talking about how the major chords are structured, and then of course the minor chord just simply flattening the 3rd note of that corresponding major key. So, like I said, the main thing is going back to these 12 notes, though, however, and remember the 12 notes, and just starting from whatever note you are in that 12-note sequence, and then playing those patterns like the 2-whole step, half step, 3-whole steps, half step. And you can basically derive every note. You know, we have the D string, right? What is the next note? E flat. E, right? Playing E. I'm not playing the camera there, but D, E flat, E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B flat, B, C sharp, D, again on the 12th fret. If it's not the same, then you missed something in there. But just that 12-note sequence. And remember, if I say A flat, I mean G sharp. If I was to say, you know, D sharp, that means E flat. Same thing. But the standard way, like I said, once again, is C, F, and G have a sharp, and B and E have a flat, right? So 3 sharps, 2 flats, and 3 sharps in that mix that add to those 7 natural notes, A through G, right? Yeah, those 3 sharps, 2 flats, that's 5 more notes. It makes the 12 notes, right? So this is just to give you an idea. Like I said, you can take any chord that you're playing. Like you said, I was talking about that E minor 7, right? Or, you know, and this is here is adding this note here, which is a 7th note out of the key of E major, or actually E minor, sorry. So it's the 7th note out of the key of E minor. So when we play an E minor chord, when we say a 7, we're talking about the 7th note out of the key of E minor. When we play this chord right here, it's just this E minor with this added minor 7th note in here. So we can move that all up here, a fret, and add the bar, and now we're playing an F minor 7, right? Whoops, am I playing? Yeah. My F minor 7, then an F sharp minor 7. Just whatever we added in there applies, right? F sharp minor 7, G minor 7, G sharp minor 7, A minor 7, right? So B flat minor 7, B minor 7, and so forth. So whatever the chord is that you learned over here, whatever the structure of it is, you know, a D7, you know, then you could technically do the same thing. Now, this chord here, like a D, you can see it's actually part of what we normally see a C chord like this, a C major chord open. If we move that all up a fret and add a bar to it, so we take these 3 fingers, play it with these 3 fingers, a C chord. Move it all up and add the bar. Now we're playing C sharp, right? You guessed it. Hopefully, C sharp. C to C sharp. It's kind of hard to play on the acoustic down on these frets, but C sharp. Then what's after C sharp? Well, if we know we have a C sharp, we don't have a D flat. I mean, C sharp would be D flat. So the next note is D, right? So D major. You can see here it makes sense. We're using this D note right here as our bass, which also connects to this D major, right? Like that form, like the A major we were playing down here, right? So we're playing that form of a chord. There's a D major, like I was talking about on the 5th fret, right? But you see, we're playing the 2nd string as our bass, and we're moving it back there and playing like that C chord shape with the bar, and we're also playing a D chord, right? Same thing with this G chord. Now you're familiar with this open G chord, right? You see it's using this 1st string as a bass, same as this G major chord here as well. G major just shaped like an E major over here, right? G major, E, F, F sharp, G. So, you know, just basically taking any chord and moving it up in that sequence of 12 notes, right? And just understanding that 12-note pattern is always the same. So now we can essentially derive a version or 2 of every chord we want, almost, like, you know, unless we're talking about more complicated chords like added 9th, 11ths, and flat 5s and all that stuff. But in general, once you know one of those chords, like in this open position, you're going to be able to just move it up a fret, add a bar, and be able to create, you know, 12 more chords, right? And of course you can play them up here, but that's not going to be so easy. Maybe on the electric, you know, it might be more applicable. But just starting with these first 12 frets. So what you want to do is some finger exercises. You want to also learn your scales and modes, which I have another video that goes through them a bit. And there's plenty of other videos as well, so it's not like I'm the only one. But I appreciate you coming back to this channel, and certainly invite you to like and subscribe and check out my other videos for more tips, but also more little segments of the fretboard, so you can also, and more finger exercises to help you increase your dexterity. Alright, so you can play your notes more clearly, smoothly, and always start out slow with those exercises. So I encourage you to check them out. Other videos on my channel. Go back and check out the channel and check out my other videos for more tips. Thanks for listening in for the moment, and look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye-bye.